Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Eardley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Welcome to episode number 54 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan. My name is Catherine Eardley. I'm your host, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club, which is my membership group for product businesses. And you can find out more at resilientretailclub.com. Today, we have another HR expert. If you remember, a couple of weeks ago, we spoke to Mandy at Modern HR, talking all about how do you recruit your team ready for Christmas, that really key part of getting your business ready for the festive season. And today I'm joined by Pip Foulsham, who is an HR expert, also helping small businesses. And this time we're going to be focused in on the all-important question of how do you manage a team, not just at Christmas. Pip shares some fantastic tips for all year round, but specifically thinking about that busy time of year. And she shares some really key insights into things that you can do to help you get ready to make it smooth. We did have a couple of technical issues in this episode. I'm not going to lie. About halfway through, you might notice the sound changing slightly when Pip had to abandon her internet, which was being impacted by building works, and finish the recording from her car. So thank you, Pip, for your tenacity, keeping going with this, and hopefully it doesn't detract from all of the fantastic things that she shares. So without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast, Pip. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to start us off by introducing yourself to everybody?
Yes. So I'm Pip Foulsham. I am a freelance HR people person, and I support small and medium businesses to solve people problems, increase employee engagement, and generally put the pizzazz into your people plans. So I'm really all about helping business owners to create amazing workplaces because, let's face it, we all want to work somewhere that we love. And a lot of the time, it doesn't always happen. So I'm kind of here to support that process of creating workplaces that people want to stay in and be a part of.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Pizzazz. That's an underused word.
You've got to have some pizzazz. And I'm running out of words that begin with P. So pizzazz just was, it was there to be used.
It is. I love it. It's brilliant. And having worked in some frankly toxic workplaces in my lifetime, I fully support that mission. And I think that is so important. I also think as well, it's really interesting because so many people I talk to start their businesses because they've had a negative experience. If I'm totally honest, a lot of people will say, well, I burnt out, or I was suffering anxiety, or I had all kinds of problems. So one of the things that is on small businesses' minds a lot of the time is they are very conscious of not wanting to create a negative workplace themselves. Is that something that you see as well?
I do, yes. I think a lot, certainly. Now I'm a small business owner myself as well. It's obviously something that's on my mind, what point do I employ people? And it does feel like a big step when it's kind of my decision. But yeah, absolutely. I think as with a lot of people management stuff, people worry about getting it wrong. And actually for me, it's almost not focusing on that. I'm an optimist by nature. It's kind of, okay, well, how can you set yourself up for success? What are the things that you can do? And the fact that you're thinking about and worrying about how it might go wrong is a good thing for me. Yes. Because it means you're actually aware of it. A lot of the time the people that don't worry about it and just sort of do it are the people that don't quite get it right. But if you're thinking about it, that means that you're interested, you're aware of it, and that's a great starting place for me. I can work with that for sure.
That is so true. I feel like I've had this exact conversation with someone who said to me, I'm just worried that I've had some really terrible managers. Yeah. I'm worried that I'm going to be a terrible manager. And I said, to be honest, I think if you're worrying about being a terrible manager, it's like parenthood, if you're worrying about being a good parent, you probably are a good parent, it's the same thing with management.
Well, and also look at what you've got there. If you've had a bad manager or a great manager, what I always say to people is you've got some really good experience, first-hand experience of what to do and what not to do. So when you manage people, if you've had a really bad experience, well, actually, you're not going to go and do all of those things because you know how bad that felt. Or if you've had an amazing leader, you're going to try and replicate the things that were good. So all of us, I think those of us that have come out of a corporate career or wherever we've worked, I think you take the good and bad pieces of what you learn through your career from people that have managed you, and you can just use all of those things as you move forward. So you don't need to worry too much about, am I going to be dreadful? I think if you're aware of it and you know how that feels, you won't do that to other people, or it's unlikely that's going to happen.
So obviously we're talking about getting ready for Christmas.
Mm.
And I think that has been a blocker when I've been talking to people previously about their plans for Christmas. They feel super nervous about the idea of managing someone. But, you know, it being Christmas and there's peak sales and this sort of very seasonal spike, they need that extra support. So they've got no choice. So
yeah,
what would you say then to somebody who's going to be a manager for maybe the first time or maybe the first time in a while at Christmas?
I guess the first thing I'd say is, look, I totally know, it's my world. I know that managing people can feel daunting, but it really can be the best thing that you do for yourself and your business. Obviously, there are people like me to kind of help with the legal and technical elements of people management. But for me, it's about getting the management behavior right. That is actually so important because those are the things that build trust, respect, credibility from the people that work for you. So I can help you, write a contract, offer someone a job, recruit someone, all of that technical stuff about getting a person in your business. But really the stuff that I would focus on if I was going to manage someone would be, how am I actually going to treat them? How am I going to behave towards them, communicate with them? So I guess there's a few points I'd cover. For me, it's about being open and honest with people, dealing with any problems early. That's the big one, because I think a lot of people don't know what to do. So they leave things and then they fester a bit. So deal with problems early. Be really clear on what your expectations are from people, because that's what people want ultimately, is what are they aiming at? If they know that, they're more likely to achieve it. Treat people like adults and speak to them on the same level as you. And this one is a big one that I've learned through my career, was be human, actually admit that you don't have all the answers, and involve your people in helping you to solve the problems. Because the term manager in itself, that word, has a connotation of being in charge of everything. And I think when people are managers, they worry that they have to know all of the answers and do everything. And actually, the real skill of an effective manager and leader is not doing everything and knowing everything. It's actually empowering the people that work for you to help solve the problems, come up with ideas, help you do your job, and you don't actually have to do everything. So I think that element of just going, look, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think? What ideas do you have? Sometimes it's really powerful because people feel involved in helping come up with a solution. That's all stuff that culturally is really going to help you.
That's so true. I always remember, as I was managing teams for many years, and I remember somebody saying to me once, if you can make yourself twice as effective as you already are, then in a team of 10, then you've only actually increased the effectiveness of the team by a small percentage.
Yeah.
But if you can empower the team to all become 10% more effective, then you that's when you start shifting the needle. So it's so true. It's not just about you, it's about then empowering the people who are working with you.
Yes. And again, think about when you were employed by other people, when you were micromanaged, how did that feel? Probably not great. When you had a manager or a leader who gave you a bit of freedom and autonomy and let you come up with solutions, that probably felt great. So use that. And also, I'm a big believer in kind of talking to people and asking them what they like. Some people like a bit more close management. Some people want to be left to it. Understand who you've got in your team and how they prefer working. And I always said to people that worked for me, I need you to help me to be a really great manager. So I need you to tell me if you need more or less of something from me, or you haven't got something that you need. And again, communication and this behavioural piece, it's the biggest tip that I can give in terms of management, because I think that's often when I get problems coming to me, it tends to boil down to communication. The message isn't clear, or they don't speak to me in a nice way, or I don't like how my manager points out my mistakes, or it's never about the task. It's usually about the management behavior or the communication or the feedback or something like that. So that to me is, if you start there and get that stuff really good, the rest of it kind of follows, and it's just a learning experience. Yes, I can teach you how to manage people, but I can't teach you how to get the best out of people and communicate in a way that people like, because it's such an individual thing.
So the key thing is to find out from them how they like the communication to happen.
Yeah, and how they like to be managed. It's a really simple question when you get someone working for you, is to sit down and say, okay, I sort of like to know what's going on if you're a bit more of a structured person, and explain what your style is like, and maybe ask that person, would you be comfortable if we caught up on a weekly basis to see how you're doing? Would you prefer it to be fortnightly? I've always asked people that work for me, how regularly do you want to have a catch up? Monthly is the sort of industry standard, but the girl that worked for me on my last job, she said fortnightly during her probation, and we just actually kept on with fortnightly, because then, and I'll come on to this point later, but then she knew she had this sort of protected time with me, that if she couldn't grab me outside of meetings, we had this time in the diary that was set aside for her to talk about whatever. It could be work, it could be something she's worrying about, it could be a sticky problem that she needed some help on, it could be something that had come up that she just wanted a bit of guidance on, but it was time for her to have with me to talk about whatever she was concerned about.
So important. Absolutely. Can I just come back to a point that you made earlier on? Because you talked about nipping any problems that might happen early on, nipping those in the bud.
Yeah.
And I was just, as you were saying that, I was thinking that I bet you there are people listening who are thinking, oh no, that is actually my worst fear. That I'm going to hire someone, they're going to come in, and then one day I'm going to notice that they're always 10 minutes late, or they sit on their phone, or they go grab a cup of coffee and they take 45 minutes instead of 10 minutes, and I always end up having to pick up their slack. And now what I've done is I've got somebody that I'm paying, but now I've also got to do almost like picking up the slack for them because they're not doing it, or this kind of thing. I think people catastrophize a little bit about, what if there is a problem and I have to talk to them about it? Do you have any tips for that exact scenario? You hire someone, you bring them in, and there's something comes up that you're not happy with, but you feel really nervous about that confrontation, or how do you even approach it with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, difficult conversations is probably one of the main things that I do a lot of training on with businesses, because it is the thing that managers struggle with, because it's not, when you get made a manager, you don't automatically necessarily get trained in these things. And it's, let's face it, it's uncomfortable. It's not a nice thing to have to do, but it is necessary. So I guess my tips are around a bit repeating some of the points I mentioned earlier about, come to that conversation. I mean, number one, prepare for it. So think about, how are you going to physically communicate that message? What words are you going to use? How will that person that you've got in front of you best receive that message? Some people need it quite blunt. Here's the problem. Some people need it a little bit diluted, because they might not cope with just a, you're not doing this and you should be type message. So think about that before you get there. Think about how you're going to phrase it, but also come from a place of, at that point, you're really trying to be supportive. So you're trying to say, look, I've noticed that you're sort of regularly 10 minutes late. Is there a problem that you want to talk to me about? Because it could be the bus timetable's changed. And they didn't feel, maybe if they're a young person, they might not feel able to say that. So they're just hoping you don't notice. Actually, that's a really easy fix, isn't it? You could just budge their start time by 10 minutes. Does it really make a difference? Actually, no, they're still getting the bus in. It could be they've got some problem outside of work that they don't feel able to raise with you. So come at it from a point of observing, I've seen this, I've noticed this, talk to me about what's happening, rather than accusing someone of, you're always 10 minutes late, do it. That shuts down the conversation. So it's about, I'm trying to understand what's happening so that I can support you. Obviously, depending on what comes out will depend how you deal with it. But for me, it's about coming to that conversation with a genuine sense of openness. I want to understand more, and supportiveness. I'm not here to tell you off as a parent. I'm here to understand as almost a colleague, and see how I can help you to fix whatever the problem is. And then whatever happens. It depends then kind of what the issue is and what else is happening as to how you tackle that. And that's where, somebody like me can get bought in if it becomes problematic or difficult, or it's a problem that can't be solved. But a lot of the time, I find it's something quite simple. In those scenarios that you've given there, it's often quite an easy fix.
No, I think that's so true. And I love what you say there. And it certainly mirrors what my experiences have been. And I think that was such a learning curve for me as a manager. And actually, I was fortunate when I started managing teams that I did actually get some training. And it was probably the most useful training I've had professionally my entire career.
Yeah.
Because actually, I think that there are ways to learn to deal with situations, and that keeping it really factual. I think it also feels much less intimidating. If you feel like you're going to have to bring them in and shout at them, then that's and then you're non-confrontational person. I mean, I'm super non-confrontational. I really don't like confrontation, but I can certainly say to somebody, I've noticed you're 10 minutes late every day, keeping it really factual. I think that's the other thing as well. Rather than letting it get sort of emotional and charged up, you can just state the facts. On Monday, your start time was 9:00. You arrived at 9:10. I'd love to understand more about that.
Yeah, and I think it is just that sort of openness to understand more. That's one of the biggest tips I give to managers, is we're not at this point, because at the moment something's happened that's raised a question. So that's almost the point. A lot of managers say to me, when do I talk to someone? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, the point at which something raises the question in your mind to go, I wonder why that's happening. So that's the point at which you have the conversation, and you are genuinely trying to understand what's going on. At this point, we haven't really made a decision about, is it a problem or not? We just want to know why. And then we tackle it after that. And sometimes, yes, it is a problem and we have to deal with that. Sometimes it's, like I say, with the bus timetable, it's the quick fix. You can resolve it and move on. But if you leave that issue for 3 months, you're then in a problem where everyone's very frustrated. And when you have the conversation, it's much more combative. It's a bit more uncomfortable. The person might be more defensive because they've been allowed to start 10 minutes late for 3 months. They don't think it's a problem. You know, if you just do it as soon as it's an issue, I promise it will help. It won't feel fun, and it might not feel nice, but I promise you it will help your business, and it will help to avoid things becoming more difficult and more formal to deal with later.
Brilliant. Fantastic. So I think that's so good, because then if you know as well that you've got a mechanism for having those conversations with somebody, I always like to start from the point as well that people will meet the 99% of people will rise to your expectations of them if they know what your expectations are.
Yes.
So I always would question myself, have I made this clear enough? Have I made the task clear enough? Did I give enough information for them to do it correctly? So almost if you take it back on yourself for a moment and go, all right, let's assume that I didn't, what else other support could I give? Then it helps you work with them in a way that's constructive, as opposed to a way that is negative or points fingers or apportions blame. It's more about, okay, how can we work on this together? So Pip, I have a question for you specifically about managing a team at Christmas, which obviously is such a busy time for product businesses. Are there any tips about management when maybe everyone is at that peak busyness?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of any manager who actually has time to take out of their busy schedule to train people. But the advice I can give is that it is the foundation for success. So for me, it comes back to sort of preparation and planning to give you time, but also to give time to your people in those early days. So I think I said earlier, your time is really the most valuable thing you can give to someone as a manager, because you're a busy person and people do value that. And I think particularly when people are new, they do need time investing in them. So it's all about, the question for me is, when somebody's new in your business, how quickly can you get that person up to speed to function successfully without the need for a lot of support? So it's a little bit of a vicious cycle, and the answer does come back to investing a bit of time up front. So also think about setting yourself up for success. Do you really need to do all of the induction? Do you need to spend every single day with that person? Can you get people in your team, if you've got them? I appreciate some people out there will be one people businesses, but are there ways that you can help yourself by either delegating stuff out or getting other people to help with that sort of upskilling and induction process? But ultimately it does come back to investing some time. And I've been there. I know it's hard, and you do have to sacrifice days and half days sometimes to spend with people and then catch up in the evenings. But that is, I do believe it's really good, because it's the stuff that if you invest early in people, it will mean that, they get up to speed more quickly and can then be really functioning highly for your business.
So you need to invest that time, work backwards so that you can see, this is when I'm going to be busy. Therefore, if I'm going to have this time for the onboarding process, this is when I would need to do it. And therefore, this is when I need to recruit. So almost you build that into your planning.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't underestimate recruiting someone can take. It's not a sort of 1 week process. In my corporate life, it would take us up to 12 weeks to recruit somebody. As a small business, I wouldn't say it takes 12 weeks, but it certainly isn't going to be an overnight thing. So you are going to need to sort of forward plan when you need someone, and then, like you say, work backwards to the processes that sit behind it. But also, don't forget that once you've offered someone a job, you've sometimes got this period. If they're working somewhere else, they might be doing a notice period of a few weeks. Well, actually, you can use that time to start their sort of onboarding and induction. So are there processes that you could automate so that they could be reading things, learning things, getting up to speed in those weeks before they start with you? And so that when they hit their induction, actually a lot of the paperworky side, maybe, even if you just need them to fill in paperwork when they start about getting paid and all of that stuff, if you can do all of that before someone starts, when they start with you on day one, that's a job you haven't then got to do because it's done and sorted. So I think it's just almost chunking it down into blocks and saying, okay, what can I do during that week? What can I do during that week? And just even getting rid of some discrete admin tasks is going to help you in the long run, because they're done, sorted. You can get rid of that to whoever you need to get it to. For payroll, for example, that's done. They're set up on payroll. It's one less thing for you to think about when they start in the business and you're spending that time with them. You haven't got to worry about, I need to make sure I get that form across to payroll, because you've already done it. I guess what I said earlier about sort of, help yourself. What can you do to help yourself? And if you can automate things, if you use systems where you can have forms available on a link, so people just click on a link and it opens up all of the forms they need as a new starter, so you haven't got to continually email them, things like that. It's streamlining processes really is the thing that's going to help you, so that you can focus your time on the information and training that person needs to get the knowledge for your business.
Perfect. And one final question before we wrap these things up. It's been such a fascinating conversation. I just wanted to touch on, how do you actually look after your team, and including yourself in that? So obviously we're focusing about getting ready for Christmas. So we've talked about managing people. We've talked about managing people during busy times and trying to automate things and get ahead. But is there anything else that somebody who is maybe going to be employing for the first time, or maybe wants to really just think about upskilling themselves as a manager or an employer, is there anything that you would suggest looking at in terms of that well-being piece, and how do you actually look after people when you're also busy?
Yeah, I mean, well-being is a huge topic right now. To be honest, it has been for a while, but I think the pandemic has definitely brought it to the forefront. And with, the pandemic and restrictions lifting, it's going to be a huge part of the employment world and the employment relationship. So for me, I think about well-being as holistic. So what you can't do is just put a bowl of fruit and put on a yoga class and say, we've done well-being, tick, that's sorted. It is a continual process. Really, for me, it's kind of two strands. Number one is, depending on how many people you have working for you, talk to your people and find out what they value, and then action as much of that as you can within your time and budget allowance, because that's an obvious place to start. Put on things that people are actually going to make use of, because that's commercially good for you, good value for money if you're going to be paying for some of the things you choose to do. But actually it means that employees will actually use them and value them and make use of them. And then I guess the second one is thinking about what you want to say about your business as part of your wellbeing plan. So if your business is focused on mindfulness, for example, well, actually then your wellbeing plan might have more of a mindfulness focus, because that represents what your business is about and your culture and your strategy and all of those things. So I think for me, well-being spans across the sort of physical, mental and financial well-being, but there are so many things you can do under a well-being umbrella. I know companies who take puppies into work, and people have like a puppy session where puppies just crawl over them, and I mean that would be my idea of heaven. I'd love that if my employee. So, but that would link into mindfulness, but it's also fun.
Yeah.
Fun is an important part of well-being as well. So think about kind of what you want to say about your business, because it's also an important part of how you attract and recruit people. Actually, if you can put examples of what you do onto your wellbeing program as part of your recruitment literature, that might help people want to work for you. So it could actually be a commercial reason for doing wellbeing, as well as it being a great thing to do. It's actually a commercial side to doing it. It can be a good attraction and possibly a retention strategy for you too.
But I think it comes back to one thing that you said earlier, which I think is a great point to end on, which is talk to your employees. So there's no point creating a wellness program if someone's got a dog allergy and you bring in puppies.
Or they hate dogs, or they're scared of dogs, or something. Exactly. So it's, for me, so many things. And I think that's where we've talked a lot about management. I think managers feel they have to cope on their own a lot of the time. For me, the trick of management and leadership is really involving your people and talking to them, because actually, why wouldn't we do that? When we do employee surveys, we're asking people what we think about what it's like to work somewhere, because we want to know. It's really your first place to start, because actually, if issues get raised there, you can kind of nip them in the bud and deal with them, and then you can start to think more broadly about other things you want to do. But start by talking to your people, because they're the best source of information, and sometimes the best source of ideas. Sometimes your people have ideas that you haven't even thought about, and then if you implement them, isn't that a great way to make people feel engaged, because they're being listened to and heard, and their ideas are being put into action? And that's just such a great thing to do for your culture.
Great point to end on. Thank you so much, Pip. Would you like to tell everyone a little bit more about how they can follow you, find out more about you?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm on pretty much all of the social media channels. I spend a lot of time on Instagram, so I'm at Pip Foulsham HR. On LinkedIn, it's Pip Foulsham, and I am on Facebook as well, Pip Foulsham HR. Just nice, easy. My surname's a bit interesting to spell, so hopefully you can tag me and help people to spell it.
Yeah.
But to be honest, if you put Pip and HR in, most people can find me. So yeah, come and find me. Come and see what I'm all about. I'd love you to engage with my content. It'd be great.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm looking forward to hearing how people get along managing their teams this Christmas.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Why not come over and see me at Resilient Retail Club over on Instagram? Why not share a picture of where you are, where you're listening, or a screenshot of where you're tuning in? I always love to hear where you are when you're listening to the podcast. It's such a thrill. And I love it when you send me a DM and let me know what you took away from the episode. I answer everybody personally, so I'd love to hear from you. Are you going to change anything about the way that you manage? How did you find the tips about having those difficult conversations? I thought it was really fascinating what Pip shared with us today, and I hope that you enjoyed it too. If you have a second and can rate and review this podcast, it makes all the difference in the world, and I really appreciate it. I promise I read every single review personally, and they mean the world. If you subscribe, you'll be the first to know about each new episode each week, and I hope to see you next time. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions, or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.